Hey writers, it's Megan coming at you live in All Writers Welcome, the Facebook group. Howdy to you all. I hope you're having a fantastic Thursday. Today's topic is top 5 tips for writing your climax. And this live was inspired by the first masterclass we did in the book launch Like a Boss Facebook group yesterday. I did a masterclass about how to get readers to fall in love with your story. And if you want to catch that, you can do it by joining the lab. I'll put a link in the comments. But I talked briefly about Climax in that training, and the people asked some really great questions. So I thought this would be a great topic to do as a live and give you 5 tips you can apply no matter what your genre is, what kind of story you're writing, things that are universal to Climax. Of course, getting down to the nitty-gritty of your climax, that takes some thought and introspection, and I'll say more about that after I go through these tips. But I wanted to just put these into the form that anybody could use no matter what your book is or your genre. All right, so tip number 1 is to tie your climax to your main character's objective. Hey, Carrie, good to see you. Tie it to what your character's been trying to do this entire time. Make it something that is really integral to what's been going on in the plot. And your main character's objective, if you hear that and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what, trust me, your main character wants something. Because if your main character didn't want something, your story wouldn't be moving forward. Your main character might want to win somebody's love. Your main character may want to kill the dragon, get away from the bad guy, be the world champion skier. There's all kinds of desires, like big and small. Any one of those is an objective. Your character could be moving towards somebody, moving away from somebody, both. Hey, Anne, great to see you. So if you're like, objective, I don't have an objective, I bet you do. If stuff's happening in your story, if you have a plot, I bet your main character has an objective. Maybe more than one. That's probably more the challenge is going, okay, what's my character's main objective? And so a great way to think about this is, without this, I wouldn't have this particular story. Maybe my main character wants multiple things, but you have to step back and go, okay, what's the one thing that makes this story go forward? If I took it out, it wouldn't be there. If you're writing a series, then you're going to have to do a little bit of digging and ask yourself, what is the main objective in this book as compared with the main objective of the series overall? And my go-to for thinking about this is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. Such great examples of how to do a climax that is tied to what the character wants in the book, but also is tied to the whole series. So, if you are like thinking about the Harry Potter series, in each book, of course, he's trying to like face down, he who shall not be named, right? Like that's the series arc is, can we beat this bad wizard? But in each book, there's this thing like, what happens if you get into the Chamber of Secrets, or are you going to win the Triwizarding Championship, right? So even for series writers, you can find, sort out the pieces. What's the objective that's linked to this book in particular? All right, so that's tip number 1 is tie your climax to your character's main objective. Let's see, a couple questions. How about almost dying? That sounds like a pretty core that sounds like a problem that's pretty much tied to a core objective, right? Which is you want to stay alive. And you would just want to make it specific and interesting for your story, because we're all mortal, right? But if death is on the line, make sure it's a death that's like related to what's been going on. If somebody's just going to get randomly hit by a bus in your climax and nothing has been done to set that up, won't be a very satisfying climax. But yeah, death tends to make things pretty high stakes. All right, Carrie says, I have an objective, but I ended up with 2 climaxes within the story, the climax within the action and the climax between the 2 characters' love story. Ooh. It's certainly okay to have a climax that spans more than one chapter. And if these 2 scenes are related, you might have like the setup in one chapter and then it comes to fruition. But it doesn't sound like there's any issue unless you're struggling to tie these climaxes back to the story as a whole. But Carrie, this would be a great question to bring up since you're in the academy on the next writing coaching call we have. We have a writing coaching call this Saturday. So if I can't tell from your question if you're having a problem or not. It doesn't sound like a problem to me, but if you're like, this is driving me crazy, go out and fill out the form for a coaching slot on Saturday's call, and I'd love to help you with it and go through it in depth. And for anybody who's like, what is that? This is the All Writers Welcome Academy, where you get access to our writing and marketing courses, and a private Facebook group where we, help you with everyday issues. And then we have a weekly coaching call where you can dive deep and get into the nitty-gritty of how does this apply to you. All right, so that was tip 1. Make sure it ties back to your main character's objective. Tip 2 is, in your climax, let a flaw or a weakness or a past mistake come up. This is going to raise the stakes. So imagine it's that climactic scene of that action movie, and not only does the hero have to save that bus full of innocent school children, but he's also afraid of heights. It's like, I have to overcome my inner thing in order to also address this outer situation. So the flaw or the weakness or the past mistake that comes up is going to just intensify. It's going to raise the stakes. And what it's also going to do is make us as readers care more deeply. Yes, action's very exciting. We want to know how things will come out. We want to know, does your character get what she wants, what she set out to get at the beginning? But when you bring up a flaw or a weakness or a past mistake that comes to bite your character in the butt, then as readers, we're even more tense. We're even more on the edges of our seats. And that's the job of your climax, right? The reason you're writing a climactic scene is because you are amping up the tension before giving us the end. You've built up your story telling us, what your character's like and what she wants and some of her flaws and mistakes. And then the tension is building toward this one climactic scene where we're going, will things work out? What will happen? Will she get what she wants? Will she, defeat the bad guy? Will she save the school children? Will she stand up for herself? Whatever that big objective was, when you bring in flaws, weaknesses, or past mistakes, they all become these possibilities that your character might not succeed, right? They're these doubts for your reader, and doubt creates tension. Tension creates interest. Interest creates turning pages. And also tension creates satisfaction once we finally see what the outcome is. And don't underestimate the power of teasing your reader a little bit, right? So that when we find out how things go for your character, we're like extra satisfied. I had to wait for it. Okay, then I got it. Makes it all the more satisfying for your readers. All right, so that was tip 2. Bring up flaws, weaknesses, past mistakes to intensify the tension during the climactic scene. Tip 3 is lead up to your climax. On the training yesterday, I used this term, of course, climax. And what that means is that your climax should not be a surprise to your readers. And a lot of authors think, oh my goodness, to be exciting, it has to be a surprise. That's not what makes it exciting. What makes it exciting for your readers is that we kind of maybe know it's coming, maybe not consciously. It might not be that we can predict what your climactic scene would be, but when we get to it, we're like, oh, of course, there had to be a showdown between these two characters. Oh, of course, his brother would come back at this key moment. Of course, that's what this character would have to face before getting to the finish line, before getting to the resolution. So the notion that your climax is exciting coming from a surprise, nope, totally not that, you guys. Having a climax that's a surprise to your readers, that's like, what? Where did that come from? Is highly unsatisfying. Remember, you're teasing us with this tension, and if we don't have some inkling of what's coming, there isn't any tension because we don't know what to ask. Remember the example I gave of, if a bus just comes and hits somebody out of the blue and there was no lead up, then we didn't have the opportunity to get invested and for there to be some tension. So, and of course, climax will look different depending on your genre. For some genres, and of course, climax is going to be pretty formulaic. You have something the reader is going to expect. There has to be that final, if I'm watching a superhero movie and there is not a final confrontation between the superhero and the big bad villain, I want my money back. That, I'm going to see a superhero movie. I want to see these two guys beat the snot out of each other at the end, right? So depending on your genre, there might be some scene you really have to have, and definitely take that into account. But you have a lot of creative license if you are making sure you're building a scene that's tied to your character's main objective, because then you can kind of have fun and play and ask, well, what's the way that I want that to come across that I've led up to? Okay, so the next tip is really, really key to being able to do that previous tip, lead up to your climax. In fact, the next two tips are, because tip number 4 is to write your climax early on. I really, really recommend write it as your second scene. Here's the order I do. I do my planning. I then do my very first scene, my lightning start, and then I move to my climax, and then I do my final scene. I do those 3. And you might not like that exact order, but here's the advantage of writing your climactic scene early on. I just told you your climax should not be a surprise. You have to lead up to it. Well, if you've written it early on, how much easier is it for you to lead up to it, right? You know where your story's going, and you can be like, oh, they're going to have this confrontation and it's going to be based on this. So I'm just going to plant this little seed in chapter 4 and then another one in chapter 12. Get people ready for what you know is going to happen in the climax. And even when you have your outline, even when you know, like, okay, I've plotted and I have done my storyboarding or whatever it is you do for planning, I've written out my little paragraphs of what's going to happen in each chapter, however you plan, that plan is not quite the same as having your climax written out. Because when you write your climax out as a scene, and it doesn't have to be polished, it's just your draft, you're going to look at it and you're going to see things in it that you didn't necessarily plan, right? That's the nature of drafting. You get in there and you write and you start getting inspired. So if you write your climactic scene as one of the first parts of your draft, it's going to be so much easier to go back and plant seeds. Oh, awesome, Joshua. I'm glad this is helpful. Yes, please share if you guys find this video helpful. If you know another writer who could use this information, please, by all means, share. Okay, so that leads me to the final tip. Tip 4 was write your climactic scene early on so you can plant those seeds. And tip number 5 won't surprise those of you who know me. It's free write. Free write, Megan's favorite thing ever. Free write or the equivalent. And let me explain that a little bit, because I know some people go, I don't free write, doesn't work for me. But let me tell you what you're going to get out of it, so then you can translate it to something you do feel comfortable doing. So the point of free writing, or this free write, is I want you to take on the voice and identity of your main character and write what your greatest fear is. Oh. So if you do like free writing, that means, just sitting down is like, oh, I'm worried this is going to happen. And what if this, and what if this, and what if this? The point of it is for you to map out what's at stake for your character. What would it be like? What would it feel like? What would be the repercussions if your character did not get her main objective? For those of you who are not free writers, this is easily done as a brainstorm. Just put, fear in the center of the paper and start branching out, or do a bullet point list. Somebody just posted in the group that he's a pacer, and I'm like, I love that term. I think I'm going to add that to my thinking of, are you a plotter, a pantser, or a pacer? I am totally a pacer. I get ideas from walking. Get a voice recorder, or talk to your phone, something that will record you. Walk up and down and do like, oh, okay, what is my character afraid of? He's afraid of this. He's afraid of that. If this happens, and go through and see what the possible dangers are. This is a way for you to really get clear on what's at stake for your character in the climax. The more you know what's at stake, the more you can build tension. And this is also key to being able to do the lead up to your climactic scene, because there are going to be some fears your character has that need to be planted throughout, right? You don't want to get to your climax and start it with saying, oh, by the way, I'm terribly afraid of snakes. And oh, look, a pit of snakes. You know, it's like, nope, there's no tension there. We totally kill the mood and take us out of the scene. So having that opportunity to plant seeds is really, really key. And free writing and then writing your climactic scene early on are both primo ways to get that. Okay, I'm going to recap the top 5 tips. Number 1 was tie your climax to your main character's main objective. Make this something that is part of us as readers getting to know, does your character get what she wants? Tip 2 was let a flaw or a weakness or a past mistake come up in the climax to increase the tension, to stack the odds against your character. Number 3 is lead up to your climax, make it an of course climax. That doesn't mean we predict 100% what's going to happen. It just means when we get there, we go, oh, of course, that's what this character would have to face. Number 4, in order to be able to lead up, you want to write your climax as one of your first scenes that you draft. So then you see which seeds you have to plant and you can go back and plant them as you draft. And tip number 5 was to do free writing or the equivalent to get all of your best creative thinking about what your character is really afraid of so that you know what is at stake for her. All right, so I hope these 5 tips help you write a climax that keeps readers at the edge of their seats. And again, if you find this useful, please definitely share it with other writers you know. And speaking of sharing things with other writers you know, I mentioned this live training that we did yesterday in the book launch like a boss group. That's the Blab group. We have another live training. So if you're not there already, you should get over there and join us in that group. And if you are there, tag a friend, grab somebody else you know is working on launching a book or wants help and advice with marketing, wants to be able to take those first baby steps, even if you are not yet ready to launch a book, even if you are at the beginning stages of writing one. The strategies for marketing your book take time to master and to get comfortable with. And so starting on them sooner means you're going to master them sooner and have more fun doing it. All right, our next live training, our next masterclass is coming up in the Blab group next Wednesday. And that will be Ella talking about how to get more fans and followers with a really simple strategy that is incredibly effective, doesn't cost more than $10 if you do it the right way, and is something anybody can use at any stage of your author career, whether you're just getting your first book out or you've got a bunch already working for you. So we hope you will join us for that. That's Book Launch Like a Boss, the Blab group. I will put a link in the comments, and I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your Thursday. I wish you happy writing.